She said, "Can you spit?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Well, your ass ain't thirsty." Bro, that is the worst. That's the worst.
And now I'm thirsty. Hold on one second.
Look, me too.
Hey everybody, Trey Wingo here, and welcome into Season 4 of Half Forgotten History. We are excited to be back with you as football is back, and we've got so many more great stories to tell and great guests for you to listen to, including Episode 1 of Season 4, one of my favorite guys I enjoyed covering when he played. Pound for pound, probably the best wide receiver in the NFL when he was on the field. He didn't have size to work with, but he had heart and he had attitude. Ice up, son. I'm talking, of course, about longtime NFL wide receiver Steve Smith. We talk about his journey out of Utah to being a mainstay for the Carolina Panthers, and then the final few years of his career with the Baltimore Ravens. That included one Sunday in Foxborough where he almost got into a major scrap with a former teammate. You're going to want to hear that story, trust me. So we're glad to be back with you for Season 4. Sit back and relax. And here now, Steve Smith, who now, of course, does great work for the NFL Network. So I guess the first thing I would ask you is, how would you describe your career? Because I have a description of what I think of when I think of Steve Smith, the player, and I want to see if it jives with what you think of Steve Smith, the player. So how would you describe your career?
That's a great question because
Sure.
as I'm becoming older, I'm really looking at it, and I have the pleasure to do analyst work. So I really see it differently as an analyst, former player, less clickbait than I saw when I first retired. When I first retired, I saw it as I'm a tough SOB. I never got a lot of credit. I never got this. I never got that. And then now I just I snicker. When I'm doing the draft, and agents and analysts and player personnel folk are now trying to compare young guys to me. Anytime somebody's below 6 feet, below 5'10", all of a sudden there's a Steve Smith Sr. analogy.
Right.
And I go back, and every year around the combine, I just go back and remind myself about, when I tore my Achilles, my agent, who's my agent throughout my whole career, he did something he knew that I needed. He sent me my combine evaluation of my scouting report and how contradictory it was on the different information that was on there. Actually, let me read it to you.
You got it? Oh, this is great. This is the video. For those listening, Steve just got out of his seat to go read it. He still has his motivation here.
This is my TV office. So I got to the left of me, people can't see. I have my NFL Network analyst cabinet, and it has my combine stuff, preparing for this, all that stuff. And so it's a report, 4200, so 2000, class of 2001. And it says has individual quickness, line release, patterns, field awareness, separation, get open, receiver short, catch / hands / body, reaction to crowd / tough, receive deep, adjust, react to ball, run after catch, blocking. And then it says secondary, spec comments, so all that stuff, right?
Right.
So, and I find it interesting. So marginal, so this is under separation, get open. Marginal cut mechanics, inconsistent, never does the same thing twice, which is correct. Not as quick in and out as ability would indicate. It says marginal and inconsistent on, this is patterns, marginal and inconsistent on breaks and all cuts, so some gathering before he gets to the depth on intermediates, right? So then I go down to secondary comments. Good quickness, acceleration, burst, excellent type mover, good feet, normal stride, but frequent. Those are two contradictory statements, right? And it just, all those things, inadequate on post fades, goes. He does have a third gear to deep ball, but not a second gear. Run under the ball, reaches to gets there. Hold on. Does have a third gear, but not a second gear. Now, I know I went to public school, but I'm generally, at a really young age, you can't get to 3 without getting to 2.
That is a factual statement. You can't skip it. You don't go from 1 to 3. You can't get to 3 if there isn't a 2 in there somewhere.
Correct. So he sent that to me. And when he sent that to me, it was awesome because it gave me that if I'm going to do this rehab at 37 years old, I got to be willing to do it all the way or just shut it down now, Steve. And so I utilized a lot of that inner conversation, inner negativity. And people say I had a chip on my shoulder. That's not a chip. That's in print. This is sent to all the scouts. It has my address. It has my name. It has my mama name. It got all kind of stuff, right? This isn't a chip. This is factual. And now, some odd years later, now y'all want to say somebody's the next me, but y'all didn't respect me when I was me.
It just shows you how flawed the process is. And that's why I kind of love the draft. But the other thing that sort of takes away from it, it's all educated guesswork, right? If everyone knew, every pick would be right and we'd never have any busts. And that's why I always call the draft the ultimate reality TV show.
But you know what, though, Trey?
Yeah.
Here's the problem that I believe that never gets talked about a lot, and I'm starting to push it. Stop talking about a player as a bust and start talking about maybe they picked the wrong player in their bad system.
Correct. Listen, you're 100.
Or the coaches drafts a Z, plays him at X, and then run first offense.
Right. No, you're 100% correct. And that, you're right, that part isn't talked about enough. And I do think it's interesting, and we could talk about this part of it for hours. Like, where you're drafted matters so much. Like, I still think Josh Rosen could have been a decent quarterback in the NFL, but he just, we went to Arizona and they were terrible, and then it just all fell apart. Patrick Mahomes, I believe, was going to be Patrick Mahomes no matter where he went. But the fact that he went to Andy Reid, and Eric Bieniemy with Travis Kelce, with Tyreek Hill, listen, don't pretend like that doesn't matter. It does absolutely matter.
It helps you a ton when you have a coach who could utilize what you do well, minimize what you don't do well, and allow the defense to try to figure that out. Don't put it on a platter for him. Right. Don't. He doesn't do this right, so we're gonna expose him. But that's what happens for some coaches when you are coaching from a book. When you have learned a particular system, which makes you confident in your coaching ability, and then when you get a guy who doesn't fit that system to that system and you need to adjust it, all of a sudden the player's a bust, and then you run him into the ground and he has to be out of the league so you don't be seen as a guy that didn't know what he was doing.
Right. So with all that being said, Steve Smith's career, according to Steve Smith, was what?
For me, it was a career that had its ups and downs, but it was one of those where whether people realize it or not, and I didn't do a good job helping it, but for me, my career I was an entrepreneur. It was a startup.
Yeah.
And that's what I say that a startup meaning I had to have some good people around me, and I did. And then I also had to screw up, which I did. But then also I learned and I adapted and I pivoted. And I was coachable, even though I present myself as very uncoachable. I was very coachable.
The reason I bring that up is I've always thought of your career in terms of boxing. And not because you fought a lot, which we can get into, but the point being, the heavyweights always get all the attention, right? The 6'3", the Julio Joneses of the world, like the DeAndre Hopkins of the world, the guy who have all the physical attributes. But then there's the middleweight boxer that's always talked about this way. Pound for pound, he may be the best fighter in the game. So to me, when I look at Steve Smith, I go with the pound for pound analogy. Like pound for pound at 5'9", 190, or whatever you were, I'm not sure there was a better, tougher receiver in football than when you played.
Well, I appreciate that. I enjoyed playing. One of the things I realized as I've gotten older, I'm very much, I enjoy and I need competition, right? Yeah. I am enamored, infatuated with competition. And so anything that has something where I can be competitive, I'm all in.
Yeah. Well, that was clearly on display your entire career, which started, as you said, in public school, University High School in Los Angeles, where you not only did well in football, but you were a high school hurdler and the triple jump. So you had it all going for you. But you started your college career at Santa Monica College. Now, let me just say this. If you're going someplace to play JUCO, Santa Monica ain't bad. There are worse places to be than Santa Monica, California.
Those worst places, West LA, Southwest.
Yeah, exactly.
All of our competitors.
Yeah. But the thing people might not remember about you is you were one starting receiver at Santa Monica, and the other starting receiver there at the same time was Chad Ochocinco. That's a lot of personality in the wide receiver room at JUCO.
But here's the thing. It was a lot of personality on that team, right? I think the two guys that came out of it is me and Chad, but there were a lot of other guys that were personalities. There was Anthony Cephas, who actually played with Isaac Keene, that ended up playing with the St. Louis and the Los Angeles Rams.
Right.
He went to Fairfax High School. Then there was a guy, Demetrius Posey, which is the reason I went to Utah, because he was like the big brother. And actually, Chad was behind Demetrius, and I played in the slot. So there was a lot of players. Our quarterback, Dylan Smith, ended up playing quarterback at Kansas. So there was a ton of players that ended up playing well at a lot of different places. And me and Chad were one of those guys, but, really the guy who passed away, that was the guy that really anchored everything, was Coach Taylor. He was there from 1979 till actually 1977 as assistant, and then became a head coach in the 80s. Coach Isaac Bruce, and then also me and Chad, and a plethora of other players. He was always there, and he coached us until he died, I think, until like 2008. And so he was always about challenging us. He was always about, this could be a pit stop, but if you do it right, or, you can get out of here. So he was a guy that always, to some degree, kept us very much accountable.
What was it like, though? Take us through. I mean, did you and Chad know, hey, how soon did you think, or did you, that, hey, we both have a shot here at playing somewhere at the next level?
Everyone there had their dreams. And
right.
With me and Chad, you got a down south guy, a West Coast guy, two knuckleheads, and you got their dreams
in a very nice way, in a very lovingly knucklehead way.
When I say knuckleheads, is you're 19, 20 years old, and you're just like any other 20-year-old. You believe the world revolves around you, right?
Yeah,
it's a knucklehead, right? I didn't say convicted felon. I just said knucklehead. And so we just we were living our lives, living our dreams out in front of everybody, and our dreams were bumping up against each other at times, because I was a charismatic wide receiver. He was a charismatic wide receiver. We both wanted to display our athleticism to get the heck on to the next level of a Division I scholarship. You add the inner city, you add the lack of funds. Man, you talk about two guys with no nickels to rub together, but somewhere to trying to go somewhere. So that was challenging at times.
Yeah. So that sent you to Utah, as you said, where you went with one of your teammates, and then the Panthers made you the third, you were a 74th overall pick in the 2000 draft in the third round. What did it mean for you to be drafted? Like, was that a goal, or were you just hopeful?
So I was hopeful to be drafted. And then here's what a knucklehead is in me. Then I'm pissed because I didn't get drafted as early as I wanted to. But I wasn't like some of these young guys where I'm like, oh, you drafted 3 mistakes before me. It was like, look, I'm going out there. I don't know what they have in store for me, but I know what I got in store for them. And so I went out there. I went out there very impatient, ready to play. Didn't know where North Carolina was. Really wasn't interested in figuring it out. All I just know is I was getting on the plane to go out there and take some folks' jobs and embarrass some folks, and that's all I really cared about. So when I hit the ground running, I hit the ground with very little of other people's feelings in mind. Yeah. I wore 7 in college, and Muhsin, my big brother, Muhsin Muhammad, was 87. I didn't want 89 because of that was Ray Caruth's number when he got in trouble.
Right.
And I'm like, man. And so I get in there, and as soon as I get there, 89's there. I'm like, fuck.
That would be a bad number considering everything that went on.
And, just show you how ignorant I was, man, and ignorant is lack of knowledge. Man, I brought my Utah cleats, right? So I didn't know if they was going to give me cleats, so I brought my cleats. I'm a football player. You bring your own stuff. I came from junior college. You don't go to play ball without having your stuff comfortable. So they say, you can't wear these. I'm like, well, so they give me some other cleats that I didn't want because they were brand new. So then I asked Moose, and so one of the guys was like, man, ask Moose if he give me his number. And I'm like, hey, Moose, you want to give up 87? And he told me to go kick rocks. So that didn't go well, but, I didn't care. That's the number I wanted. I didn't want this 89. And probably about 10 minutes after that, Coach George Seifert turns around. I turn around, he's in my face, and he goes, hey, we drafted you. And I'm like, yeah, don't fuck this up for me. And walked off. And I'm like, right? And so from there, I went into mini camp. I'm on this team, and, they just kind of saw me as a returner. Man, I'm going against these dudes in practice. And then I leave pissed because, they had a guy that they drafted a couple of years before, a first-round corner. I think his name was Rashad Anderson. They had some other guys that were corners that they drafted a couple of years before me. And I'm like, so I get in the third round, and this is a first-round draft pick? And so I just went in there like, look, all these bum-ass dudes they got, and so it just that's kind of how it went.
Well, what's interesting, too, because that 2001, your first year, the 2001 Carolina Panthers, people forget. You guys won the first week of the season. You went 1-0, and then you proceeded to lose the next 15 games, which, by the way, I think that's almost worse than going 0-16. Because if you start 1-0, you have hope, and then it's just beaten out of you over the next 15 games.
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty accurate.
What was that like? What was the level of frustration like, especially your rookie year when you think you're better than some of these other guys that are playing and you're sort of in a limited role and you drop 15 in a row?
Well, that's where it went up and down. That's what we dropped 15 in a row. I wasn't really allowed to play wide receiver. I just was told I was going to be a returner. And so that kind of – I was on that roller coaster. I would come to the wide receiver meeting room with a big-ass a box of cereal, and I would just eat cereal in the meeting. Like, I'm just a returner, right? And so I had that kind of like, that, like I said, that knucklehead, that kind of like, man, y'all don't care about me, so fuck it. Let me know when the special teams is up, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm eating cereal in the meetings. Then they kick me out and tell me I can't bring cereal in the meetings, right? And then I finally get to start against the New England Patriots. It's my last game, the last game of the season. And they say, you're going to start, but Patrick Jeffries is going to run out of the tunnel.
Why?
Because I was the disruptive rookie who needed to be taught a lesson.
How did that sit with you?
Patrick, go look up Carolina Panthers and see where Patrick Jeffrey is on the stat book, and that'll let you know how I felt about it.
Yeah, that had to be a tough one.
It was more of, it already fed that, right? It already fed, they don't really believe in me on paper. They don't really believe me in this. All right. So I kind of was like, all right, I'm going to do this my way. And so I actually, in that offseason, I had a meeting with Mark Richardson, the president at the time, who's a good friend of mine still.
Right.
And I wanted to change my number. I also wanted to switch because Ward Dunn. I wanted to switch to running back, and I gained a little weight because I just felt like I wasn't going to play wide receiver. And I just, I did like anybody else. I was looking for an air pocket, so I wanted to just start over. And I had lunch with Mark Richardson. I told him that I didn't want that number anymore. And why'd y'all give me this? If I'm being honest, this murderer's number. He was from the West Coast, light skin. Like, I didn't want that association. I had gotten, I had some troubles. And so after that, Mark sat me down and said, listen, after Ray had that number, we've given that number to everybody who we felt was a stopgap. And we hoped that you can change that number. That's why we gave it to you. And so if you want to change it, sleep on it, think about it for a week. At that time, me and God were not on the same page, so he didn't say pray. It would have. So I thought about it, and I was like, all right. And I told some of my family members, told my wife what he said. And after that lunch, I was like, all right. And so I went in there, and ever since, that's why I kept the number. That's why I kind of stayed with it. And then I just went in there and said, basically everything about the Carolina Panthers, as Patrick Jeffrey, Muhsin Muhammad, Tembiaka Batuka, this guy, that guy. I'm going to erase all those, and I'm going to be the best player. I'm going to be the franchise player. And I made that commitment about February 2002, 2003. I hired a golf coach who was a mental guy, a sports psychologist. And from there, man, I had short-term, long-term goals, daily goals. And I just went into it and I said, everybody that's in front of me, Muhsin, Donald Hayes, Patrick Jeffries, Isaac Bruce, all these guys, honestly, fuck them. Yeah. And so I went in there and I said, the only wide receiver, I want to be the franchise wide receiver, and everything that these guys will be, I want to erase them off the statistical categories of wide receiver. And from there, that's how I approached it. And so I didn't care to be friends with anybody. I didn't want to be a friend. I didn't care to be a friend. I didn't give a fuck what you thought about me. My goal was to go around you, through you, do what I need to do, obviously make money for my family, and sit back to where when I'm sitting down, I look at my career. If I got fired, I always said I would never be one of those, and I call them poop butts, never be one of those guys that sit back and says, man, I should have did this. I was like, right. If I'm going to sit back, I'm going to say, if I get fired, I'm going to get fired my way. And that's how I kind of took it. And now that I'm older, I kind of realize I probably shouldn't have did that way. But then it's allowed me to, now that I come TV and some of that stuff at a different approach, it actually softens people. They're like, well, he isn't as crazy as we thought.
Well, it clearly worked for you. So let's take a quick break, and we'll talk about the acceleration of your career and when you did do all those things you said you were going to do and erase all those guys out of the record book. We're right back on Half Forgotten History with Steve Smith. This episode of Half Forgotten History is brought to you by Bourbon Time. Even if you don't have the traditional 9-to-5 schedule, there's no denying that this past year has changed the way that work and rest intersect. Without a designated office to come home from, we're missing that natural break in our days. And our friends at Maker's Mark recognize this phenomenon and want to help us out a little bit. Beat the burnout and start blocking off the hour of 6 to 7 p.m. as your me time when you do what you love for you and only you. For me, I like to sit back with a nice drink of Maker's Mark over some ice. And what I love about Maker's Mark is it's so smooth. There's no bitterness. and it's silky, kind of like all of Ron Burgundy's ties. It's fantastic. So let's make the idea of bourbon time a reality. Join me in reclaiming 6 to 7 p.m. as the happiest hour so you can do whatever it is that makes you happy. And if it involves a glass of bourbon, remember to drink Maker's Mark responsibly. Maker's Mark Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, 45% alcohol by volume, copyright 2021, Maker's Mark Distillery Incorporated, Loretto, Kentucky. All right, back with Steve Smith on Half Forgotten History. When we last left, you had just decided you were going to make a commitment to erase everybody from the Carolina Panthers receiving records book, which you would go on to do. But when did you know? Like, when did you take the plan, like you said, short-term, long-term, and put it in action? When did you know it was working? Is there a specific game, a specific play, a specific moment where you said, I'm going to do this?
You know, this may sound cliche and people think that, but I knew this plan was set for me when someone in my family told me, when your ass fell out of college, don't bring your ass back here.
Yeah.
And that was right before that individual kicked me out of their house, and I had to go live with another family member 2 weeks before I had to go off to Utah. So for me, this was my only plan. So for me, I was always been playing with house money. So I never said this is what it is. It was always, I would do whatever it took to get where I needed to go and do it with other lengths. And so by the time heading into my second year, I kind of knew, I kind of started to figure out what I needed to do. I hired like I said, a sports psychologist. I had a trainer. I quit working out with the team. I didn't do off-season conditioning with the team. I didn't do off-season. Coach Fox came in. They had testing, and we would have to do bench and do 40s and vertical and all that stuff. And so I was a dick. So one time, the first time we came in, we had to do bench 225, 215, and you had to bench as many times you can. So the first time I came in, I benched it 5 times. So the next year I came in, I benched it. I got to 5, and I said, how many did I do last year? They said 5. I did 6, put on the rack, and told them, fuck you, I'm out.
Yeah.
But I did that to prove a point because I knew when I come in, they would make me test and make sure I had no room for error. So then because I never came to all-season conditioning, they had where you had a conditioning test at the end of OTAs.
Right.
And if you came, you had 4. If you didn't, you had 5 or 6. So as a team, we would run the 4. But whoever didn't come, which was me most of the time, I had to do the extra one. So we had our time to do, but I always saved a little bit of energy. So when I had to do the 5th one by myself, the team will watch me.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever my time was, so say we had to do a full gasser at 30, bro, I would come in at 26. The last one, and I would flick off the strength coach the whole time. I'm passing it. And my goal was, whatever y'all think y'all can do or how you can break me, I've already prepared for it, and I am unbreakable. Yeah. And so I would always do that. And then they gave me a workout bonus to come to the team. Workout. If they ever asked me to restructure, I would say, take my workout bonus that I will never get as my restructure. So I never restructured, and I never came to off-season conditioning.
Well, it's funny, though. Like, all the great ones find something to motivate them, find something to keep them going. And clearly, those kind of things are what fueled your fire. Like, to me, everyone had, like, I remember watching the first couple of years of NFL Live, but to me, the coming out party for you was the divisional game in the playoffs that year against the Rams, when you caught the 69-yard touchdown to seal the game that eventually led you guys to Super Bowl 39 against the Patriots. Did that, for you, was that like the play where you put yourself on the map?
It was the Dallas game, actually.
Oh, really?
Before, because Dallas had beat the brakes off of us earlier that year.
Yep.
And so we had that playoff game down there, and Terrence Newman, who's a good friend, he was a rookie, and so I was just going in on him. And I just started, we were running plays, and I was just looking at Jake like, yo, you didn't throw me the ball last time. That's why we lost. We came in. Dan Heaney was the head coach, was the offense coordinator. We came in at halftime one time. He said, Steve, what do you think you could beat the guy on the first time? And I looked at him and I said, throw me the effing ball. and he looked at me and he goes, yeah, I won't ask him that ever again. And so when we played them that game, if you go back and look, that first pass I got against Dallas, I played upset because I was like, man, this is what I can do. This is when you said that I'm inconsistent. This is marginal. I run marginal cut mechanics, inconsistent, never does the same thing twice. And so I utilize all of that information. And my trainer, and that's all we did. We worked on everything they said I didn't do. And so I started to create, that's where my entrepreneur, I started to look at what they deemed as my weaknesses, and I started working on it. Yeah. So you said I can't count. I'm work on my numbers. Yeah. You said I can't do this, and I started lifting, and I started training in a way that was all based on what they said I did not do very well.
Yeah, and you turned that into over 1,000 career catches and almost 15,000 receiving yards. One of the things that I think was most interesting about your career is you were, as we alluded to, not the biggest guy out there, 5'9", something else. But it felt like you were better at high pointing the ball when you were at your peak than almost anyone. Like, you found a way to play like you were 6'3", even though you were 5'9".
Well, I ran track. I ran the hurdles. I did high jump. I did long jump. I played a lot of different sports growing up. I played basketball, and I was dunking the basketball my freshman year in high school. I was able to do a lot of things. I just didn't have the height. You talk about 6'3". I have this joke with my kids because they all, I'm the professional football player that, the kids be like, oh yeah, don't be one of those dads that what you used to. Right, you used to do, I always say, man, I've always played bigger, and so, we do all the measuring, and so one day they were like, well, let's measure you, Dad, and so they measured me, and actually because of my arms, my wingspan is actually 6'3".
There you go.
Right, and so for me, it's just I just never had the height, I just had everything else.
You did, and the thing that I loved about your career is it never, like, your persona on the field never changed. Like, there was a fighter in you. I mean, people forget, you got kicked out of a preseason game for getting into it with a defensive back. Most people do not get that heated in a preseason game. You and Chris Culliver found a way to get into it in a preseason game that got you guys ejected.
I was with Baltimore. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. It's man, that's just that was the way.
You're a fighter.
My mom told me one time, if you come home crying because you got beat up, you're gonna get your ass whooped.
Yeah.
And like, that's not what you tell a kid, though. Think about it.
Yeah, that's true.
You get whooping for getting beat up.
Yeah.
And so, my mom was tough on me. My mom, my dad picked me up on the weekends, but my mom was, single mom during the week. And when you're a single mom in the 80s and 90s, she had me when she was 17 years old. You have no time for empathy. You have no time. Oh, little Steven, you got a boo-boo, huh? It was, hey, is it bleeding? Yeah. Is it bad? Can you move it? Yeah. Then you're good. One time my mom told me this, and it was terrible. One time we were somewhere, we didn't have a lot of money, and I said I was thirsty. You ready, Trey? You ready for this? She said, can you spit? I said, yeah. She said, well, your ass ain't thirsty. Bro, that is the worst. That's the worst.
That's tough love. That's tough love.
Have to do with being parched.
And now I'm thirsty. Hold on a second.
Look, me too.
Just telling me that story made me thirsty. Oh, but that explains so much, right? It explains the ice up thing with Aqib Talib after the Monday night game. Like, it provided you with that ultimate, it doesn't matter. I'm going to be better than you.
Yeah, but when I think about it as a dad, man, I'm like, that's fucked up. Like,
Yeah.
She even told my daughter, who's 20 now,
Yeah.
she was over at the house when my daughter was 8 years old. 8 years old. And my daughter's she's telling on her older brother.
Yeah.
My mom tells my 8-year-old daughter at the time, you know, and she still lives in California, right?
Yeah.
And she says, you know what, BJ? She goes, yes, Grandma. You know what they say about tattletelling? She goes, no. She says, snitches get stitches. She told my 8-year-old daughter, snitches get stitches.
That's harsh, man. That's
Bro,
harsh.
that's terrible.
Yeah.
You know what that is? That's child abuse in 2021
Yeah.
right now. That is child abuse.
Oh.
Where's
Oh
DHS?
my gosh. Yeah. I was about to say, I don't know how deep we want to go into this, but one of my favorite stories about you, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's great. But when you guys were playing the Patriots and you thought that your former teammate Jermaine Wiggins had said some things about you that you didn't like you went after him in the tunnel after the game.
So here's that story. I didn't go after him. See, that is the BS story that came out.
Okay, so let's shoot it straight then.
So I don't have a problem shooting it straight. That's what I do.
Right? I agree.
So he has said some things, and I used to have Wiggins' telephone number.
Yeah.
So after we lost, I'm over there talking to Brandon LaFell, a former teammate. Correct. And I see out of my corner of my eye Wiggins. So I tell Phil, I say, hey, let me hold on, dog. I gotta go talk to somebody. So I walk over there to Wiggins, and I don't loud talk.
Yeah.
I say, hey, bro, why'd you say what you said? He's like, man, you know it's true. I said, listen, bro.
Well, to be clear, what Wiggins said, he thought you were a bad teammate, right? He said that, yeah. Which is like the ultimate disrespect, right? It is, really. It really is.
Right, because there's things in the locker room that all men do, say, and act that if we all threw it out there, you don't want that.
Correct.
And when you're having a good year, there's some banter and there's some things that go on that the regular outside world would find it very cruel.
Correct.
Right?
There are no boundaries in the locker room.
There is no boundaries, right? And so, again, if I'm a terrible teammate that you don't want to be involved around me, why do you have my number and I have your number?
Correct.
Because there's some teammates I don't mess with. They don't have my number and I don't have their number. Like never had them, vice versa. So I said, like, bro, I said, I don't fool with you no more. I was like, and I'm all about confronting people eye to eye. Right. So there's no ambiguity. I want you to know how I feel about you, and you tell me how you feel about me. So, and I don't want to hear it through some podcast or somewhere else. I want to hear it from Mr. Ed the horse's mouth.
Right.
So, actually, I said, I don't fuck with you no more. He was like, bro, what are you talking about? It's like what you said, man. I said that was real sideways. And I'm gonna let you chill, bro. Next time, we're gonna have problems. And so he was like, he said something to the effect and was like, I'm around my family. And I didn't know that was his kids.
Right.
And I'm like, well, my bad. So then I walk away, and then he starts to loud talk.
As you're walking away.
As I'm walking away. You ain't gonna effing cuss me out in front of my kids. And I'm a straight up dude. I didn't know that was your kids. And I said this to him, but your kids can watch you get your ass whooped, though, if that's what you want to do.
And for people that don't know who Jermaine Wiggins is, he's essentially a refrigerator with arms. He's a tight end that played for a bunch. He must have had 80, 90 pounds on you.
I said that. And then that's when he started that Boston getting loud.
Right.
Holding him back and blah, blah, blah. And then he had I didn't know his co-host of the radio show was with him. And that guy was like, man, I'll blankety blank, I'll do this. And I said, listen, after I put Wiggins to sleep, I will turn he had a suit on. I said, bro, I will take your suit off you and put it back on your body inside out. And so he's like, man, we gonna blah, blah, blah. And I said, listen. And I said it foolishly when I was young. I said, listen, you get your boys, you get your boys, I get my boys. And we'll decide, we'll let our folks figure out who's sending who flowers to wear. Yeah. And basically I was like, whatever. So they end up breaking it up, and then he goes on there and says, I attacked him, and I
Right.
tried to. I don't try. I told him how I felt. I told him where I stood, and then he proceeded to loud talk. I'll loud talk on the field to a certain point, and then I start to say, in my mind, I'm done with all this talking. I believe it, and I say it on TV. I have always been down. Now I'm taking a step back. I've always been okay with a fist fight in a phone booth.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I grew up. And so now that I'm older, I kind of like, I don't need that in my life, because at some point, someone's gonna have to end how this is gonna happen. And I'm betting on me. I know how I want to end things. And I want to end things the way where I don't have to worry about when I go to the store, if you're gonna be waiting in my driveway, if you get what I'm saying.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't want that. And I want to be a good example for my fans, be a good example for the Lord, be a good example that I have. My wife has respect and honor to kiss me with her mouth on this mouth. And I don't have anything try not to have anything intentionally that I'm ashamed of.
Yeah.
And so with Wiggins, I've worked NFL Network, I've done Radio Row, and it's always interesting. I walk past him every time, and I look for eye contact.
He's looking everywhere else.
Because at the end of it, I'm going to do my job, bro.
Yeah.
And I don't have anything to hide. I don't have no beef with Wiggins. But when we talk about Jermaine or we talk about other stuff, I put Jermaine in the same category that my grandpa used to do, which is my grandpa, who I love and I honor, used to love mincemeat pie. I don't fool with mincemeat pie. And Jermaine Wiggins is mixed meat pie. And so some folks like it, some folks don't. I'm not saying that whoever he is, yes, he has Super Bowl rings, yes, he has this, yes, he has that. He's a man that I will honor and respect. But at the end of it, I think it's best for the Wiggins family and the Smith family that I do my job, stay in my lane, because if I get out of my lane and that old guy comes back, all I want to know is, what color do your family want your bouquet to be?
So we will move on from this lane. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the favorite things that happened in Steve Smith's career and a couple of questions about what will happen in the 2021 season. Stay with us. We're coming right back. This episode of Half Forgotten History is brought to you by Starbucks Triple Shot Energy Extra Strength Coffee Beverage in a Can. That's Starbucks coffee that you love, ready to drink, offered in classic flavors, and now in zero sugar. They have 4 core flavors: vanilla, dark roast, cafe mocha, and caramel. And now also offering 2 zero sugar flavors, black and vanilla. Both are zero sugar and dairy-free. What gives you your energy? Find your Starbucks Triple Shot Energy online or at your local store. Back with one of my favorite players to cover, Steve Smith, who now does a great job for the NFL Network. So let's put some ribbons on your career. Is there a play or a moment that you're more proud of than anything else when you played? Is there something like, yeah, that was me? Someone says, what is Steve Smith? It was that play.
Well, there's a lot of plays, man, I really love. There's some stuff, man, that I did. I always loved blocking.
Yeah.
I loved. There were times where I would just go up against guys, and I just would know that I had a guy.
Yeah. And you could wear him out.
I could wear him out. There was a play that it was when I was in Baltimore that I was playing against a player, and I was lined up in a tight formation. I had to go what they call force. I had to go hit the safety.
Yep.
And so I go down there and I'll hit him, and he'd be like, "Hey," he's like, "Smitty, just let you know, man. All day now, all day." I said, "Okay, that's what I'm talking about."
That's the worst thing you can say to you.
I said, "Yes, that's what I need," right? And so a couple of plays later, same thing. And he hit, And then this is probably about 5 or 6 plays. So we're talking about the first 20 plays within the game. So I'm lined up, and I get down to my stance and I look at him. And I don't look at him like that. Like, I look at him like,
yes, yeah.
I have to get you. You know what he does?
Huh.
He looks at me and then he looks away.
You had him right there.
I had him. But you know what I had? You know, some people, you say I had him. What do you think I had him on?
You're going to block him, right?
Yeah, but what do you think? What do you think he's thinking?
I want to get away from it.
What do you think I think he's thinking?
That he wants no part of it.
Exactly.
Yeah. He's tapping out.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now, even when it's not my play, I would tell Marshall Yanda, or like if he came down and re-identified, came down as like a middle linebacker and they slid and they would slide, we would get in the huddle, and the pulling guard or the tackle, whoever had him, or the fullback, I would tell him, nah, that's my guy.
Yeah.
Go get somebody else.
All right. Best teammate you ever had?
Man, in Carolina, it was a number of guys. Muhsin, Ricky Pro, Brinson Buckner. His name is Stephen Davis. I'll call him Radio because he's from Columbia, South Carolina.
Absolutely. Number 48.
Yep. Man, there's a ton. One of the guys who was a great mentor to me, John Casey, the kicker. He actually taught me finance. Then in Baltimore, it was Sis, Justin Forsett. Me and him are really still good friends right now. Anthony Levine. You know, over my career, there's a number of guys that when I sit down and I think about it, they just trigger a lot of great things in me that like I still talk to those guys today. Like Brandon LaFell literally texted me the other day. I used to always still talk to Torrey Smith. When I retired, I texted guys that I played with because they were like, you're not going to play. And I made a trip on purpose when I retired, and we were in Hawaii. And so while they were in training camp, I took a picture of them, of the Hawaii skyline, and said, I told y'all boys, while you in training camp, I'll be on the beach.
I can respect that flex, having gone to Hawaii for the last couple of decades. Teammate that was the biggest freak show of all time. Like, you couldn't believe what he could do athletically.
Julius Peppers.
That's what I figured you'd say.
C.J. Mosley was pretty impressive.
Really?
A silent assassin, to be honest.
Yeah. Listen, I loved watching him play when he was healthy. I love that guy.
Marshall Yanda.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a Hall of Fame guy.
Haloti Nada, for a guy that big and what he was able to do.
Yeah.
And then I have to shout him out because I'm just be honest. I've never met another black guy named Elvis, so I got to go with Elvis Dumerville.
That's true. I got to say, I think you might be right. I don't think I know another brother named Elvis as well. All right. A lot of people are wondering what Cam Newton has left. You played with Cam Newton. You saw him when he was at his best. Obviously, last year was a wash because he got COVID, and then he had no off season, and then some of the best players for the Patriots got hurt. What do you think are realistic expectations for Cam in 2021 in New England?
Well, I think that is a great question. And really, for me, looking at the New England Patriots, what kind of offense are they going to run? Are they going to settle in on an RPO game? Or are they going to do traditional? And whichever way they go, you know, Cam has prevailed, league MVP. He's had outstanding numbers, national championship, Heisman Trophy in the RPO game.
Yeah.
But the RPO game has not really been a staple for the New England Patriots because of obviously a non-RPO type of quarterback in Tom Brady prior to him going to Tampa Bay. Now with them getting Matt Jones, is that an emphasis that they're kind of settling in on returning back to the RPO game?
Yeah.
I don't really know, but I think the fact that they only signed him back to another 1-year deal, is one of those, we all love to do it until it doesn't work out, which is when you bet on yourself and, you got to prove it deal.
Yeah.
But if history tells us anything about athletes, you can't shortchange them and you can't put them in a box, and they will turn what you believe can't happen into the possible. So I can see him doing great things, or I can see it not working out. I don't really know. We don't know.
Well, it's interesting. You're right, because Mac Jones and Cam Newton aren't running the same offense. Like those, they're going to be two different offenses in what utilize their skill sets. That's 100% correct. Since you did finish up with over 1,000 receptions and almost 15,000 receiving yards, what do you make of the height debate over Devontae Smith? Some people are concerned about his height and what his production will be at the next level.
It's valid. I think weight and height has to do with, it's a valid point if those things have played into that perception with the injuries. And he's had some injuries.
Yeah.
Also, too, the athleticism of corners have really changed. You look at Jalen Ramsey, he's a physical corner. So if you have a guy who's 160 pounds and he's going against a guy who's 6'2", 220 and
Good
gets
luck.
jammed up, he has to be able to work that out. Now, you're not going to improve that in the weight room necessarily, but you could get in the weight room and get your short distance striking strength up. But then you also got to get those quick feet. And so if he can get off the line, get off the jam, then height is an issue. But what's going to happen is if all the concerns become reality, he unfortunately will cause people to say, see, you can't do this, because height was always an issue for shorter wide receivers until enough shorter wide receivers said that isn't a concern. So that's the only difference that I would say. If his production lacks based off the concerns, then that's going to become a real narrative.
Well, it's like the same thing with quarterbacks. Suddenly we're seeing Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray go first overall when Russell Wilson had to wait until the third round because he was under 6 feet tall. All right, listen, we've taken up enough of your time, but I just want to leave people with this. The thing you find out about people when you have major changes in your life. And I've always said what surprises you is the people you hear from, and maybe sometimes more importantly, the people that you don't. We've always enjoyed conversations together, and it's been great. But when I went through a major life change not too long ago, one of the first people to call me was Steve Smith. And I picked up the phone, and I saw it was your number, and I'll never forget the first thing you said. Say, I'm just calling to see if you're okay. And I was fine, but I was surprised that you were one of the first people to reach out. So you always find out who's real and who isn't when things aren't going so well for you. So know that meant a lot to me when you did it, and it verified how I felt about you from 15 years ago.
Well, as long as you don't go back to Hawaii and someone steals your phone number again.
That is true. He was texting me, and someone did steal my phone in Hawaii, and he was like, man, why didn't you return my text? So I had to reconnect through that. Listen, you've always been a real one. I've always enjoyed watching you play. You're doing a great job on the NFL Network. Thanks for being part of this for the show today, and just keep being you, all right?
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks to Steve Smith for joining us. We wish him the best this season as he covers the NFL for the NFL Network, and again, the Jermaine Wiggins story. Can't hear it enough. But coming up next, a special bonus episode with my friend Matt Rule, the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. What it was like going through the first COVID season in NFL history as a first-year head coach, and how he's dealing with that still going into the 2021 season with so many issues and questions and concerns from players about the vaccines. That's next on a special bonus episode of Half Forgotten History with Matt Rule.